Firstly, Dr. Vikram Bahukararatne, who is the leader of the Nava Samasamaj Party. Mr. Krishmal Varansurya, attorney at law and a political activist. Professor Sirimal Abhiratne, who is an economist. He joined us last week as well on the show. And also Mr. Rusiripala Tennakon, who is a former banker. Let's start off with Professor Sirimal Abhiratne today on our show. Our topic of discussion today is Budget 2016 and the way forward. Professor, last week you said you were not really aware of the Budget 2016 because it was just after a few hours that we had the show. Today, a week after, what are your thoughts on Budget 2016? Your time starts now.
I have seen the budget. Basically, when you look at it, out of the context, you would see it's a market-oriented budget because you would see elements of trade liberalization and tax reform, simplification and rationalization of taxes, and great emphasis on private sector and the private sector participation in the economy. And with all these things, you would see it's a market-oriented budget. And but when you take it in the context, that means when you look at it by taking the economic state of the economy into consideration, then you wouldn't expect such a comfortable budget because of the kind of problems, especially with respect to the fiscal consolidation and export promotion and the business environment and the bad performance of the state-owned enterprise. When you look at all these background information, you wouldn't expect such a comfortable budget, and that's where my worry is actually, because in effect I would expect that its delivery, though it looks market-oriented and very good budget, I would expect its delivery within the next 12 months going to be a challenge, and it's going to depend on key factors. And what are these key factors? The reform process and the private sector response and the overall economic performance and the state-owned enterprise reform. So these are actually key factors which determine the delivery of the budget within the next 12 months. So it's a conditional budget. That's what I think.
Professor Abhiratne, you said the implementation is going to be tough. Do you mean to say Budget 2016 is not practical?
Yes, I would say that reduction in taxes and tax revenue and also simplification, although these things are in the right direction, I would expect to have the anticipated outcome at the end of the day. There should be some tough decisions to be taken. In fact, especially the bold reform process need to be begun now.
Thank you very much, Professor Abhiratne. I now move on to Mr. Rusiripala Tennakon, who is a banker. Mr. Tennakon, Professor Abhiratne believes that the Budget 2016 is tough to implement and the practicality is somewhat lost. As a banker, you are quite aware of the fiscal and the monetary policies of the country. What are your thoughts on 2016 budget?
Well, I basically agree with Professor Abhiratne because he spelled out the general background in which this budget was presented. My own opinion is that this is a budget which is being presented with so much of constraints behind. I don't think we have any such similar situation in the history of this country filled with so many constraints for presenting a budget or before presenting a budget. A huge deficit, a need of reformations, need of discipline in the country, in the economic field. These are very, very important areas to be addressed. So it's more than the budgeting part. I think the economy has to be disciplined in the first instance. There's a lot to be done in that direction, without which, as Professor Abhiratne very correctly stated, that this would be in the end a mere statement without achieving any result as anticipated. So if we are looking into a situation where such disastrous results will not be the end of the budget, as we all expect it to be otherwise. Everybody in the country will have to look at it seriously and contribute their part to make it a success to the extent possible. But the constraints are so big and great, they are not easily surmounted. A lot depend on factors that are beyond the control of the Minister of Finance and the government of this country. In the international scenario, internationally what is happening in the economic field, global situation, all this is going to affect the budgetary proposals very seriously.
Mr. Nikon, I want to follow up with another question. The budget usually highlights the economic vision of the government which is in power, which is in place. Does this budget 2016 outline any development that needs to take place in Sri Lanka in terms of vision, in terms of what we need to achieve in 20 years or 10 years from now?
Well, from the way I look at it, I think they have addressed it in a basically a very short-term method, you know, rather than being a very long-term visionary budget to sort of bring back the economy into proper place or normal situation. It has addressed the issue in a very short-term perspective. That's how I look at it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tendakon. No development at all. Is that what Mr. Tendakon is trying to say? We'll find out in a bit when the Q&A begins. I now move on to Dr. Vikram Bahu Karunaratne, who is the leader of the Navasama Samaja Party. Dr. Karunaratne, nice to have you on the show for the first time, by the way. Good evening to you. Mr. Karunaratne, do you think that the public aspirations have been met through Budget 2016? Your time starts now.
Actually, this budget is a politically motivated budget. This government came to power almost by uprising of masses, even though they won in election or 2 elections, but they are pressurized by the mass movement, and therefore they have to satisfy. They have number of things they have done to proposals to satisfy the political pressures coming, and so therefore it's a compromise budget, liberal, but making concessions to the working class and also the middle classes who are expecting various reliefs. If you think of the how they have allocated money for education, health, and also for transport, development of transport and so on, you can see that in addition, considering the national question, they are expecting large sums of capital coming from diaspora to invest here. So they believe giving concessions to such investments, promising land, promising various special positions, they could attract this large sums of money available in the diaspora. You get more than 1 million people, Tamil and also other Sinhala and groups are living abroad, who would come, have shown willingness to come and invest, because commenting on this before the budget, Arjuna Mahendran said that going after borrowing money from abroad has been unsuccessful.
Yes, your time is up, Dr. Karunaratne, but I'll give you 20 seconds to finish.
Yeah. So one thing he has emphasized is that money has to come, if it is possible to get some people sympathetic to come here and invest, that should be promoted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karunaratne. I now move on to Mr. Krishmal Varanasuri, who is an attorney at law and also a political activist. He's the only attorney at law amongst the 4 guests that we have today. So I'm going to ask you a very legal question now, Mr. Varanasuri. Legality over the public purse. Does the citizens of this country have a legality over the public purse? Your time starts now.
Yeah. Thank you, Shamir, and thanks to you and all of you and MBC MTV for inviting us once again to your August Assembly. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I'd like to actually go there. because when we look at a budget, people start talking about a budget, everyone down the street, everyone gathered at the tap talks of a budget when the speech comes on, and then we tend to sort of forget it and wait for the next year's speech to come on. I'd like to go back to the basics and see as to what the budget is. You know what, it's called appropriation bill, it's a bill of parliament. Now, you know, when democracy evolved from the direct democracy where people participated in the process, like the ancient Athens, Sparta states, the Greek nation states, when all of us didn't have the time to go around and start distributing our limited resources to meet our unlimited wants, we sent representatives to a place to make those decisions for us, paid them a salary, gave them land cruisers and all that, to go and do that for us. And that is how that direct democracy became a participatory democracy. Now, it's a citizens that hold the absolute power over the purse, the public purse. How it works is, the legislature, our representatives, make those decisions of the competing interests on behalf of us. The executive, who has our executive power, our sovereign power, makes a decision on how they will allocate these policies, the funds, and then bring it before the legislature. And then there's another arm, our judicial power, our sovereign judicial power is vested in a judiciary. And if the executive is either violating or breaching the trust that it has the people have reposed in it, or is not utilizing the monies that they should be utilizing it in terms of what they have proclaimed, the people have right to go and check it. And also, we as citizens need to follow up on over the next year through dialogue, through discussion, through questions, to see whether the end results that they proclaimed in the budget have been met. You follow? Budget is not for us to just once a year go before the TV and listen to a speech and say, everything is done. It doesn't even attract legality until it's passed by Parliament.
Mr. Arun, very quickly, to make it very simple, can the public hold the government in power, or even the finance minister, when a budget is passed and if the budget proposals are not implemented?
Absolutely.
They could do so.
Absolutely. There is no law barring a citizen from doing it. We have done it in the past, not on the budget itself, but you see, the budget is a quantitative parameter to it. The qualitative parameter is given through the various heads of it. Say some allocation is done to a ministry and the ministry spends that money. Now, if the ministry is spending that money in a corrupt manner, or if the transparency of that spending is in question, the citizen can take that expenditure to court and say, this is what you promised, this is not the way it's being spent, and ask the court to check on it.
Does it apply to commodity prices as well?
Of course it does, and there are mechanisms. Thank
you very much, Mr. Arun Surya. Looking forward to grilling you on that in the Q&A session. Let's introduce our journalist this evening. Onto my immediate right is Nadeem Majid. Onto my immediate left, good evening Nadeem. Onto my immediate left is Faraj Shaukat Ali. And also onto my far left is Shahin Churampati. So I open the floor for questions from our journalist. And your time stands at 20 minutes. Let's start off with Shahin today.
Thank you very much, Shamir. I'll pose this question to Mr. Tennakon. Mr. Tennakon, do you believe this budget is a budget with loads of pros and cons, or is it just merely, as you say, disastrous and impractical?
Well, what I meant was by saying that this is a budget presented at a time with full of constraints on the budget presenters, the government and the country. So this is the background to this budget. So to what extent it spells out an era for development or proposals for development has to be viewed in that context. But I think here the finance minister has tried his best to present what could be done in the situation, but it is not really a good picture. It presents a very grim situation and a grim look for the future.
But don't you believe that's a good approach in terms of taking a risk as a government?
Approach in what sense?
As in, now you say that if the picture is looking bad, but then always a way forward is the way forward, not taking a look back and then looking for the way forward, isn't it?
Well, in any case, in the case of a budget and in the case of a financial projection, one has to always look forward. There is no looking back. So there is nothing new in that. Always, whatever the situation is, you have to look forward. Otherwise, that is the basic principle. So anybody has to be within that and then look forward to. But to what extent can we make it a success is what is important for the country. It's not the beauty of the words or the presentation or how you present it, how big it is, how long it takes to present. It is not all that. What is important is, in the end, are we going to achieve all what is proclaimed? So and after the period, what are we expecting to achieve? If it is a question of just putting the economy in in some place to make it workable or to make it survive, it's a survival budget. Then the element of development, the element of rectification of the past errors, all that has to be addressed. So can such a thing can be looked into in a situation like this? This was my question. It is a broad question.
Mr. Varnasurya, one of my major gripes with this, not just the budget but with the public purse in Sri Lanka, is accountability. Now we have institutions in parliament like COPE and COPE.
Now you need to rephrase your question. I don't want to know about your gripe with regard to the budget, but
it's a public gripe.
Yeah,
it's a public gripe.
You need to rephrase
One
your
of the public's gripes with our finances is how it's being monitored, who's checking on it. So obviously you have the Auditor General's Department, the Committee on Public Accounts and the Committee on Public Enterprises in Parliament. I read an interesting article by you in which you say that these institutions are no longer capable of carrying out that function. You say that the public needs to look for new means by which to carry out this function. What do you mean by that? Simply public interest litigation?
Several reasons, Najib. Thanks for asking the question. Yours is a valid public grievance. You see, I say that about the Auditor General for this reason. Our Auditor General, until the new enactment comes out, the legislation that we are all waiting for, it does a accounting audit. Now that is, you need to have a bill to show for your expenditure. Now all of us know how easy it is to put a bill in a file, saying I spent so much. But Europe or other countries have gone much further than that. They have what is called a value for money audit, a VFM audit. Now what a VFM does is, the public officer or the Auditor General's officer can go and question the executive, the minister or the officers, tell us whether the money was spent economically, whether the means that you wanted to justify by spending this money have been achieved. Could you not have achieved it by spending lesser money, for example a highway or whatever? Now a VFM audit is not about just checking whether there is bill for the expenditure, but going in deeply and saying whether there is value for money. Now we need to get there. Because
the government has already promised this, isn't it? They say that in the national audit bill that will come out in the future, that they are going to introduce value for money. I was part of those people in January and in August proclaiming this from stages that we promised this to the people. But so we need to get there. And also I agree to an extent with some previous speakers that this budget appears to be a hybrid model because you are trying to appease two segments. Now the UNF coalition promised a social market economy. New country in 60 months.
Yes. Now that is not what was promised by the People's Alliance-led regime. Now we have a hybrid government of both of these people in one cabinet. Obviously they are trying to find ways of going forward. So that may be the appeasements from this side to that side that we see two colors in the same budget, Professor. Maybe that's what we are seeing. But by doing that, we can't breach our promises to the people, because the people, like Dr. Arunatha said, the people of this country made a historic move. No politician did that. It's the people that walked out in their masses and made this change in January, then again proclaimed it in August. We need to give those promises to be so. Value for money audit in the Auditor General's office, and also the public service, Najib. Don't forget that we had a golden era of public service where officers stood up to the executive, even the Minister or Prime Minister, and said, no, I don't agree with this spending. But now that concept of a public servant, I've said this before here, has gradually become a government servant. You see, they don't serve the public anymore. Any government that comes puts their people in office and takes the earlier fellow out. So the public servant is now not serving the public, he is serving the government. So he'll say yes to everything the minister says, otherwise his job is at stake. So because we don't have that integrity in office anymore, I think the people must forge new tools to go into public spending and check on it.
We are talking about the people being able to take, I'll grill him instead of you on that, but being able to take remedial action through the judiciary in the event that, for example, the ministry has not spent the money allocated to it in the way that the government promised it would. In the event that you do take such legal action, what redress can you expect from the judiciary? What's in the statutes? What's in the law?
The judiciary will immediately, don't forget that the early 2002, 2000, now there are criticism against that particular Chief Justice or how he ran the office at that time. However, but 2002, 2000, 2005 era, there were several such instances, the Lanka Marine Sands, John Keels, Insurance Corporation, Waters Edge, there were several cases of public expenditure, including reaching up to the head of state, that was checked by the Supreme Court and said this is not the way this money should have been expended. And then that was struck off, things were made right again, and status quo was reversed. So, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal have extraordinary jurisdiction. And other than that, the public can go to the normal law. Consumer Affairs Authority on commodities like Shamil said, they have recourses available, which the public should agitate and challenge. You follow? Because there is nothing that the Supreme Court of this country cannot do. And it is in par with the other two institutions of government. As I said, if the executive is breaching the trust upon which we have put the money in the executive, the other arm, the check and balance of it in the constitution is the judiciary. They are supposed to check and say no. But then, of course, there is a slight question. I'll take 30 seconds to explain that. The petrol price case, you remember, I was also a lawyer appearing in that case. Now, I believe that it's not up to the Supreme Court to say, from tonight you sell petrol at 111 rupees. I don't think the Supreme Court ought to go there. Because public policy is a matter that must be best left in the hands of elected people to do that. But the Supreme Court can of course look at the taxation part and say, this appears to be unlawful. There are too many hidden taxes that are unnecessarily taxing the citizen. So go back to Parliament and come back with a policy that's healthy for the country.
Professor Abeyratne, from the economist's point of view, do you agree with what Mr. Tennakoon said, that this is a survival budget?
You can look at it from different perspectives, I guess. That if you take the policies one by one and the revenue proposals and expenditure proposals one by one, and then you will find so many inconsistencies. That is true. You may find even absurd policy measures, the proposals, and you may find certain things that you cannot explain why on earth these kind of proposals have been brought into the budget. And
Example.
so there are many.
Professor,
Can you give
example about
examples about these absurd policies?
Yes. Now, for example, if you take that 1 million withdrawal from banks and the extraordinary increase in the price of certain motor vehicles, and these kind of things you can't explain actually why, what is the rationale behind these things. But so you will find so many inconsistencies, contradictions, and trade-off. Of course, you achieve something positive, and then with another one you nullify the effect. Nevertheless, when you look at the overall setup of the budget, the overall flavor of it, and that's what I mean, that it is, in spite of all these weaknesses, and we find that it's a market-oriented budget. And that's actually where the country should move sooner or later. But when it comes to the implementation part, I said that given the economic crisis, near crisis situation of the country, this is not the time that we, of course it's good to be optimistic, and then you undertake the challenge and then you get ready to face the challenge, so that actually the budget, the outcome will depend on other things as I explained.
Professor, we spoke of a magic wand in the year 2014 when the budget came through. I recollect the opposition, now in power, the UNP opposition, said that there was a magic wand in the hands of the president at that time in 2014, the former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, because there was a lot of concessions. So this deemed it as a carrot approach. You give a carrot and try to convince the people. Does the present regime even have a stick, let alone a carrot, to convince the people about what they promised before the August 17th polls?
I think the budget, when you look at the numbers, and then you will find that the tax is not the tax revenue, and then non-tax revenue has gone up, and we don't know where it come from, and the expenditure has gone up, so that you will find that it is inconsistent with what public expect in general. The problem comes when it is the time for fiscal consolidation. And I remember that I mentioned, and some of us mentioned last time also, that the tax revenue nearly covers the annual loan repayment now we have this commitment. And if you take the last year number, I remember that 1,265 billion we have to pay throughout this 2015 year. And then the income, according to the budget numbers, the tax revenue is 1,284 billion. So which means it nearly covers the loan repayment. So all these expenditure items that are listed in the budget, more than 2,000 billion, they are actually virtually coming from further borrowings.
Dr. Karunaratne, the leader of the Navasama Samaja Party, we recollect prior to the August 17 general elections, the Prime Minister now said, when he was the Prime Minister then as well, said that he will ensure that every household will have a vehicle. The present taxation, as Professor Abeyratne pointed out, does this give any leeway for individuals to go up there and buy a vehicle? We saw the vehicle emission price has gone up by 5,000 rupees to 5,000 rupees. Electric car prices have increased drastically. Hybrid car prices have increased drastically because of the taxes. Does this really project what the Prime Minister said prior to the elections?
But then, in a discussion before the budget, Arjuna Mahendran said, taxation in this country is so ridiculous that 90% of the taxes are paid by the poor and only 10% is paid by the rich. So therefore, radical change should come in the budget to tax the rich in many ways, whatever the possible, and create a balance, at least to 60-40. So I think quite a few of the proposals in the budget is meant for this change, and the flexibility and also market orientation, all that is good, but then they have to satisfy what they have promised to the people as well. And then in another comment he made, he said the public corporations really eat into the system, because these corporations do not satisfy the people with the promised services, and in addition they become a burden because they don't make money, or they spend money unnecessarily, and finally Treasury has to look after the
so you will say, Dr. Karunaratne, that the policy of this budget is take money from the rich and give it to the poor and ignore the poor.
Well, to at some extent they have to make certain attempts, at least. That's what they have tried.
Dr. Karunaratne, are you saying that you agree with the taxation policy that this government has tried to introduce through this budget?
No, I'm not saying. I'm not for.
Do you see it as a step in the right direction?
No, I'm not for against this budget. What I'm trying to say is that what they are trying to do politically and motivation, and it doesn't agree. Might not agree with the economic policies that they are having in mind, but they have to do these things because they are promised to the people.
Mr.
Yes, Nadim, yes, sir.
Mr. Varmasuri, there's also a question of in terms of logic here, because the government did say in their budget reading that they are looking for an energy saving environment. With that being said, electric car prices and hybrid have shot up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I quite agree with you. There is an apparent absence of logic in that particular question. But when the whole world is moving, I think they're looking at it again. I heard this morning that they're looking at even the emission taxes, Shami, that you mentioned, I think, for three-wheelers and bikes that they had earlier, now they have reduced it. So it's not 5,000 anymore. So they're trying to appease the public again. But this should have been clearly thought out. You see, the whole world is moving towards a greener environment and encouraging electro-driven cars and lack of emissions. We are taxing double or taxing more than what we had taxed before for the same cars. So that is not motivating the public towards getting to an electro-friendly and emission-free environment. So I completely agree with you. There is an absence of logic there. Perhaps it will be interesting to hear from the policymakers as to why they made that decision. Like Dr. Karunaratne said, if it's to tax it's a Robin Hood economy, to take from the rich and give the poor, I think they need to find a better way of doing that than taxing electric cars.
Do you believe they brought in that that
Yes,
how many people can afford this electric cars?
Yeah, but Dr. Aruna, very funnily in the market, very funny in the market, it's being promoted so much so that 6 months ago I didn't even know that there was such a car. But now I have met some fairly ordinary people who seem to be driving it. And apparently it can be even charged on a normal plug socket at home. You follow? So if we were to encourage it, it would have been the future.
Mr. Tennecoon, what are your thoughts on this? Electric cars, the prices have been shot up. You are a banker, some sort of confusion according to Minister Mahinda Samarsinghe in Parliament. He said that he does not agree with the increase of taxes in electric cars, and there seems to be a confusion. So the finance minister goes and makes a presentation when there are confusions over a budget. Is that what you recollect?
Yeah, there is a bit of a mismatch in the thinking there, I also believe, because you know, wherever the country can gain by economically, by way of saving on fuel or by way of saving on saving the environmental situation, I think we must give priority and weightage to that. But in this instance, I think they seem to have forgotten that. But then coming back to this taxation issue, which all of us have been discussing here, I wish to add a point. See the tax structure of this country today. The indirect taxes that the ordinary people in this country are paying by far exceed the corporate tax element. By far. If you want, I can show a graph how this is distributed. This 80-20 and the proposal to bring it to 60-40, all these are just words. This budget has not addressed that issue at all, because if that issue has been addressed properly, the real net result would have been that it could have immediately passed on several benefits and easy living for the poor. That has not happened here.
But Mr. Rusripala, what about the finance minister's undertaking to turn Sri Lanka into a shopper's paradise? Isn't that good?
Well, in an open market economy, one cannot live within closed doors. We have, I think, heavy weightage has been given in this budget to income from tourism, income from foreign investment, like that. You know, we are opening up, in other words, so we can't live in a closed world. So to open up, we'll have to be with the rest of the world. So in that context, I think it is timely that we give some consideration to such matters as well. So it's not out of place.
So it's a good.
It is a good thing. It's a good thing. But then that is not the only thing that is required. Now,
Finance Minister also proposes to have a gem and diamond auction in Sri Lanka in order to increase foreign exchange. Well, is that practical?
Another very intriguing situation, like Professor Aberatna was trying to say, because I don't see, actually we do not know what is spelled out in this proposal in detail. I do not know what really the finance minister has been advised of as a auction, gem auction. But if he is thinking of a auction of our, material from our own resources, we don't find any diamonds in this country. So he must be thinking of diamonds imported to be auctioned in this country.
Hopefully not blood diamonds.
When you import, you don't know which one is blood and which one is black or which one is otherwise. So, but I think there is some kind of a serious aberration in the thinking there. If you are thinking of using our resources to build our own economy, where do we have diamonds? You should have given more thought to such proposals, because there is if you go to talk about gems and gem resources, there are lots of things that we can talk about. I think we'll be going out in the subject, but I'd like to add one thing. We cannot forget that gems, whatever is said and done, however insignificant in proportion the income that it is bringing, it is an important resource to this country, like cricket, like gems, like tea. There is a blend of the country's name in all those elements. So that we cannot afford to spoil. You see, so therefore, in an auction or whatever, the value addition part has to be remained in this country, within the premises of this country. It should not be given out of the country. That is how we have to safeguard the right and the real value of our resources.
So in that context,
Faraz, we need to go for a short commercial break, and when we come back, we have the third round. We're going for a short commercial break. Our topic of discussion today is Budget 2016. Is it practical, and what is the way forward? All this and more after the break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Let's start off the third round with Dr. Vikram Bhau Karunaratne, leader of the Navasama Samaja Party. Dr. Karunaratne, you said this is a politically motivated budget. What makes you say this? Do you think that the government is trying to satisfy the needs and the wants of the public in the short term and not thinking about the long run? The time starts now.
Yes. Of course, they have long-term ideas which Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe came out with a long statement where he indicated what sort of economic development he has in mind, and also there were discussions before. But when it came into the real proposals in the budget, it's very clear that they have looked into the political aspect mostly, particularly about to satisfy the demands coming from various groups which coalesced into the movement which pushed them into power. So then in addition, you can see that the 10 proposals which are made against certain, as we discussed, like in taxing the vehicles and so on, is really again to show that they are not going to give so-called liberal space for the bourgeoisie or the rich people, and that they are willing to tax them and reduce the burden on the people. That aspect of the theme of the budget is there all over. Therefore, one can say that it is not. It is a restricted budget, not in the name of pure liberal economics. But on the other hand, the far left already started a campaign claiming that this is the budget which is according to the neoliberal policies currently going around the world. They are agitating against, particularly the proposal for trying to convert the money in the provident fund and to make use of that for investments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karunaratne. I now move on to Professor Sirimal Aberatne, who is an economist. Professor, interestingly, the finance minister, following the budget speech that he made in Parliament, has gone on stage and said several times, several instances, that the private sector needs to play a huge role, and even issued a challenge to the private sector to implement the policies that have been brought forward by the present government. Is it really practical to put all your eggs onto one basket like the private sector and expect them to implement it, and you just stay without doing anything about it?
Yes, this budget at the implementation part, it becomes a conditional budget. That is exactly because of that, because the private sector has to play a major role unless the budget, the budgetary outcome would not be there as we anticipate today. Why the private sector has to play a major role? Because they have to increase investment in a simple way. Now they are actually investing about 22-23% of GDP, and if we are expecting this economy to grow at 8%, 10% rate in the years to come, they should make a jump. They should make a leap, massive leap forward, to increase it to 32-33% of GDP. That means by 10% of GDP they should increase it. But the problem is actually Our private sector, the kind of private sector that we are talking about in this country is so tiny and so small that I don't think that they have the strength to make such a big leap forward. So that's where the problem comes. But otherwise, of course, the private sector has to play a major role, and I would include both domestic and foreign private sector in that sense. Because over the last many years, the private sector was not playing the role that they were supposed to play, both domestic and foreign private sector. So unless they respond positively, and the next year, the trouble will be multiplied.
Professor Aberatna, the finance minister, again in January when the interim budget came into play, spoke of a super gain tax. But if you are really aware of this tax in question, it was only enacted to law or signed by the speaker several weeks before the budget speech was made. And then you have the finance minister saying in parliament and thanking the private sector for paying these taxes. Do you think that the private sector really paid these taxes in question? The super gain tax that we are talking about.
Well, we have seen the budget is moving in the positive, in the market-oriented direction, and then there's a tax reforms, and probably now Sri Lanka is one of the lowest low tax country, probably somewhere in line with Singapore, like that. But if the private sector is taking this seriously, okay, then of course they will move. But it is not the only factor that the private sector considers when they make investment. Of course, people expected that after the war is over, and we had the excuse to say that, okay, because of the war, investors don't come and invest here. But the war was over, and 5 years gone. Even after that, we are at the same level. And the private sector is not taking initiative. And we could not raise more than $1 billion as foreign investment. Why is that? Because the private sector considers certain other important factors.
Thank you very much, Professor Aberatna. Taxation policies, reforms are needed. It's up to the public to decide. We're just opening the door for you to think and not to make you come into conclusions. I now move on to Mr. Rusiripala Tennakon, who is a banker. Professor Aberatna said the private sector is tiny and cannot significantly make an impact towards the country's economy. First question is, do you agree or disagree? Or do you think that the private sector needs to be given the proper machinery to invest in Sri Lanka? Your time starts now.
Yes. The private sector, I think the taxation policy that was introduced in the 100-day government, which he has withdrawn rightly, by accepting the fact that, these one-off taxes are not going to help very much. So that's a good indication, because once he realizes that those are not the permanent solutions to keep the private sector going, well, he has withdrawn, and he has now reconciled to the fact that, to give a more modest taxation to the country. What we cannot forget in the tax structure in this country today is, if you look at the tax income, I think people will wonder if they come to know that the total taxes that the government earns from liquor and tobacco by far exceeds the total other taxes in this country. So at the same time, we are claiming that we should have a Amadhyapa country, and then we should curtail smoking. All that is there. I am just thinking what will happen to the economy of this country if some drastic steps are taken to stop those activities.
I want to stop you for a second there, Mr. Nikon. The President a few days ago took a bold decision again as the head of cabinet to increase the taxes that was reduced in terms of imported beer, which was of a less alcohol percentage as well. I will give you 30 seconds for that.
I think that step he took because so it appeared to be a bit of a disparity in the thinking and the policy declared, because when suddenly tax for liquor, some item was reduced, it looked a little out of place, and President had to correct that situation.
What do you think, Mr. Tennakon, should be the policy of the present regime in order to strengthen the private sector in this country without just putting in mere words out there? Well, what should be the machinery that should be
introduced? I think the problem that we have is we always think in the very sort of macro level and very the big picture. Now, private sector does not mean, improving the private sector does not mean that we forget the agricultural sector, the normal producers in this country. Now, take for example, I'll just to quote one example. Many years back, before this trouble started, this country was half self-sufficient with our own commodity requirements like the bee onion, potatoes, chilies coming from Jaffna. What has happened to that production today? After so many years of finishing the war, have we come back to at least somewhere where we stopped it? Have we addressed that issue in this budget? Have we thought of granting any concessions to the agricultural sector, the producers of that nature in this country, from that part of the country?
They've probably all gone.
No, these are serious lapses, I think, in the thinking, because we always think of about the big picture. When we think of private sector, we think of the motor car factory coming in, and then assembly parts coming in, Volkswagens that coming in, which we are yet to see. I don't know. We will see the light of day of those factories in this country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennecoon.
This is our thinking.
Thank you very much,
but
Mr.
let us
Tennecoon.
also think small for the sake of the country.
Let's move on to Mr. Krishmal Varanasuri, attorney at law and a political activist. Mr. Varanasuri, you said something very interesting. You said that the budget that was put forward by the finance minister satisfies two segments. But you did not speak of these two segments that it satisfies. You spoke of the UNP and SLFP-led coalition. However, you did not speak about the two segments that you are referring to. I would want to know about that, and also about your thoughts on the private sector involvement in Budget 2016.
Yeah, I'll come to that immediately, Shamit. What I was trying to say was that the thinking behind the budget may have been that you're trying to sail a ship with two sets of sailors in it. One who have the PA side, who are traditionally molded in the perhaps more leftist side of politics, and then the capitalist-oriented, Western-oriented UNF regime. So that may have been why we are seeing mixed signals in this budget. And before I come to what we can do towards the private sector, can I quickly go back and emphasize on what I said earlier, that this is still a proposal. What I want to emphasize, the citizens still have the power. Similar dialogues like you're having today and other agitations, if we are not satisfied with it, remember, it's still a bill. The bill only becomes law once it's passed by Parliament. Now, it is up to us to go and agitate with those people that we send into Parliament, by public agitations, by discussions like this, and say that we don't agree with some of these things, because remember, it's our power over the purse. It will not, none of these proposals will ever come and see the day of light until we, the people, say so through our elected representatives. So it's still up to us to say what we agree with or what we don't. Now, going to your question of Shamil on private sector encouragement, I don't see how you can encourage the SME, the small medium particularly, we're talking the private sector, by a Robin Hood economy. You follow? If we are trying to now suddenly say, okay, all the taxes have been paid by the poor people and therefore we are going to take it all away and let the rich fellows handle it now and become a Saradil or Robin Hood economy, that is not going to encourage private sector. Now, for example, there is a BOI concession, Professor, I know you saw that up to now the BOI approvals are given on the strict condition that even a byproduct cannot be sold in the local market. Follow? I remember appearing for a gentleman once who had come from Japan and he was sending bags, the cut piece from the handle. He sold to an enterprising fellow in Maharagama to make butterflies, he was taken to court. That's a BOI agreement. You can't sell anything in the local market. But now, we are trying to give leverage to say 5% of it to be sold in the local market. Now, what's that going to do to our local industrialists? You follow? These are things that you must clearly think of if you are to encourage the SME sector. And can I very quickly finish by saying this, Shamil?
20 seconds.
Okay. We need to strengthen our institutions. What's happened to, now for example, remember the monies allocated by the ministries are spent by officers below. I know the corruption that is rampant in the ministries and the officers and the institutions that are run by the ministries below. What's happened to the Parliamentary High Courts Committee that used to check on public appointments? What's happened to institutions that actually went in and checked That's why I say citizens must forge new tools to go after these people and see that the monies that we've approved are spent properly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varun Surya. I open the floor for questions from the journalists. Let's start off with Faraz. You were waiting to pose a question for us.
Shall we do this to Dr. Vikram Bau, please? How will this proposal to permit tea blending affect our plantation industry?
You see, the question of workers in the plantation sector is tied with the overall problem of agrarian revolution in the country. Actually, that in the statement made by Ranil Wickremesinghe prior to the budget, he has mentioned having 2,500 clusters of putting together villages in entire country in the agricultural sector or the rural sector, and trying to create powerful centers which could support the revival of the market in the areas and creating development centers. So that I believe that in the present situation it should include the plantation sector as well, because these workers in the plantation sector in the form of kind of slaves working and producing product which is sent abroad is not viable in the present form. We can see that small producers to tea producers, for example, which people have 2 or 3 acres, with their family labor, they do a better job and the family is having a better condition. So trying to go on with a system which has with this kind of workers and plantation is not going to be viable, and they can't give up salary at all. If they in the present form, if they increase the salary to at least 1,000 rupees per day, then the whole system will collapse because they are unable to keep the system going.
Will the permitting of the blending of Ceylon tea, won't it reduce the value of brand Ceylon tea and therefore have a further detrimental effect on these workers in the plantation industry?
Oh, well, that is a problem of technology, right? But there could be ways and means of introducing blending. If you mean the mixing of tea.
That's right, yes.
With your permission, Faraz, can I direct that question to Mr. Tennakon?
Indeed, yes. Would you like to take that on?
Yes. You know, blending was a thing that we all looked down upon as a bad practice, affecting our industry, affecting our good name, affecting the established market positions that Sri Lanka had as Ceylon tea. Now we were trying to protect this. Now what has happened is he has legalized the blending. So in other words, he has legalized the bad practice. That's about all.
Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
How can it be a good thing? If you want to maintain the quality and the standard of the name of Sri Lanka tea, Ceylon tea, it is sold as Ceylon tea. And when you sell a blended stuff as Ceylon tea, when it is not the real Ceylon tea, who will buy it for the second time?
But they say that
which market are we going to serve?
They say that the blending will not necessarily affect the Ceylon tea brand.
You won't be able to sell it at pure Ceylon tea. How will you sell pure Ceylon tea?
They will maintain a separate brand called Ceylon tea.
Not pure Ceylon tea.
Well, no, the logo, which is the lion, is only put on packets of tea that are pure Ceylon tea. So it'd be illegal to use that logo on a packet of blended tea.
Whereas with your excuse, we will use another term instead of saying illegal. We'll call it some kind of a prostitution. I think it's a better way to put it.
But
So you disagree with this thing?
if you can import bulk and blend that and
Well, that's
can sell it.
that is what is being done now. They buy bulk tea, they take it out to Dubai or one of those places out there, and
So
they
it's a-
blend
it's-
it with
It's a way
Ceylon
of
tea.
making profit.
Well, they do. That's a different, whole new industry. But Sri Lanka seems to be left behind. In
So
that
Dr.
context-
Karat agrees with what Faraz is saying right now. Is it blending is good? Is that what you're trying to say, Dr. Karat?
Well, it is a practice that is in all kind of agricultural goods.
I want to ask open-ended question from all four gentlemen. Do you agree with this proposal that was put forward?
well,
Dr.
several-
Mr. Nagol, very quickly, yes or no? Do you agree?
very several practices prevail, but all practices are not considered as good or bad.
Right, I want to pose the question to-
taste, but I really don't agree. The blending, I call it a prostitution.
So you don't agree with
you
it? I
can-
want to ask Professor Abhay about it as well. Just give me a second,
No,
Dr.
but-
Arant.
yes,
I will come back to you in a
exactly.
minute.
Okay, right.
Professor Abhay do you agree or
without
disagree?
knowing this technology part and legal part as well as the world demand part of tea, I cannot give you a direct answer to that question, but my problem is actually we are trying to find a local solution to a global problem. Okay, so if it makes profit high and for the private sector, and of course they will go for it, and if you restrict it by legals and those things, of course it will not happen.
Right, so
that's
I want to ask Mr. Varun Surya's view as well.
Very simply, Shamir, we will not be able to sell pure Ceylon tea blended with any other tea. So, if pure Ceylon tea remains as pure Ceylon tea, and if someone's going to make a buck out of it and a SME sector or something large is going to grow out of it, and monies are going to come into the economy, I have no problem with any other tea being sold. But not, as we were discussing earlier, pure Ceylon tea being made a hybrid tea also. Everything seems to be hybrid these days, and then declassifying our product, and therefore the people won't be there won't be incentive to buy the product. So anything to do with the product, I will not agree with. Leave pure Ceylon tea aside and sell any other tea, mango tea if you want. That doesn't matter to me.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's move on from that subject. Yes, Nadeem.
Actually, I wanted to ask this question of the economist and the banker on our panel, Mr. Tennakon and Professor Abhay Ratna. The Prime Minister in his economic policy statement or EPS in Parliament indicated that the EPS would discipline the budget and that the budget would, but we've seen some major misalignments between what was said in the economic policy statement and the mid-term economic policy and what has been done thereafter in the budget, especially with the taxation policy. The Prime Minister was talking about reaching 40%, I think, of tax revenue from income tax by 2020. Whereas in this budget, we've seen the threshold has been put up to 2.4 million with a blanket of 15%. And at the same time, indirect taxation has gone up to 86% of tax revenue. How do you, as an economist and a banker, how do you see this discrepancy?
This is something inconsistent, a major inconsistency that I see in the budget. Because when the countries, when they improve their per capita income and when they come to the middle income levels, actually what you should expect is the increase in the share of direct taxes, so income taxes, and then the decrease in the share of indirect taxes, so the taxes on commodities. And Dr. Karnathan also mentioned this. Now what happens is actually we are going in the reverse direction, and we say that our per capita income is rising and we are moving into middle income levels, but our tax system is very underdeveloped, and it has the underdevelopment, the characteristics of underdevelopment.
Do you think, if I were to put it this way, that the tax system that has been proposed through this budget is maybe reflective of the fact that Sri Lanka is not really a middle income country yet? Would you agree with that statement?
That's a point that you can put forward and then keep on arguing that middle income level, if you by the indicators that we measure and which are available through the official statistical reports is at the lower level. But if you take the other countries,
you're a scientist. So
but if you take the other countries, even in our neighborhood, and actually the combination of this income tax and indirect tax, the taxes on commodities, and these two things are actually moving in the other direction, whereas we are moving in the reverse direction.
But why is that in Sri Lanka's case?
Because
Why
I
is
think
that?
the tax reform that has been undertaken in this budget is, I think there is something wrong. That's the
Is it
problem.
because there are no economics or there are no scientists
No, I
who
think
study the field of economics who
problem
are
has
advising
been
them
there,
on
I
tax
think.
policy and how it should move?
Yeah, I think the income taxes, and they have made a big change in the income taxes, and I think that has been the major problem there.
I want to get the view of
Mr.
Mr. Tennekon
Tennekon
as well on this.
I look at it from this side because actually, as I said at the beginning, he has a very big task in bringing the revenue up. All the time now, if you look at the past, the predictions for tax in revenue, we have never reached the targets that we wanted to achieve. I think the finance minister has this time tried to simplify the taxation system in order to reach the targets somehow or other and get this income. I think that is why I said at the beginning, this is a very short-term budget. He has in view actually bringing into the coffers the money that he has targeted to bring in, and a best way to do that is to simplify the tax system, and he has addressed that issue.
But Mr. Tennekon, do you think he has addressed the issue? Because the way I see it, at least, putting that blanket of 15% on everyone who's making over 2.4 million, it's almost a regressive tax system, isn't it?
Well, economically,
it is a regressive tax
economically looking at it is like that. But you see the situation that we are faced with. He has to have money. The income has to be brought in. Even the income that is predicted, that is projected, is not coming. So it remains as figures. So he has given a simplified tax system in order to achieve a target to some extent.
Mr. Varmasuri?
Can I just add that I agree that this is what he has done, but I don't agree that this is how we ought to have done this, because going back to earlier question, see, our estimated income of 2.047 billion and the expenditure of 2.7 billion, that's a deficit of 740 billion. Now, out of that, 1.5 billion is earned through taxation. So, almost 2/3 of the estimated income is appearing to be earned through taxation. Now, shouldn't it all have been rather to give incentives to generation of income, not generation of taxation? Get income generation projects in there and then tax the fellows. Now here we are trying to bridge the gap by only almost 2/3 by taxation. But that was not what was assured to the public.
You have budget deficit, Professor Abiratna, of 340 billion.
The taxation is inefficient also, highly inefficient.
Yeah.
The direct taxation is easily collected. But the indirect taxation is
1.5 billion out of the 2.0.
If you take, for example, the collection from customs, it is totally undervalued. And
half of it goes under the count.
Yeah.
Professor Abiratna, we have Professor Abiratna, we have 740 billion budget deficit, as pointed out by Mr. Varmasuri very clearly. Is the debt servicing also included in this budget deficit, or is it not there?
Only the interest payment part. And
Isn't
the
this a problem?
amortization part, and that is the capital payment, and that is not included in the budget. And it is actually, you have to go into details and to look out, to check out how much is the amortization payment and how much is the interest payment. And when you take these two things together, then you will see the picture that the tax income is nearly bridging the annual debt service.
So you have approximately around 225 to 230 billion, Mr. Tennekon, and then plus 300 billion, it comes up to
330 billion for debt servicing alone, interest apart. That interest element has been taken into account in the income and expenditure.
That's right.
But not the debt servicing.
So the capital repayments are missing.
330. So
Is
the
it a problem
shortfall-
that it's not in the
shortfall
budget?
actually is not 700
It's much
billion.
more.
It is 1,000 billion.
That's right.
what about
I
Dr.
totally
Karantas?
agree with the emphasis made by Arjun Mahendran that taxation should be efficient. It is totally unacceptable the way the taxation is going on. Now, for example, even in the customs, so much of cheating is going on. Now, I brought in an issue about people importing tires and how the customs duty is imposed, and there's corruption. And I have handed over to while I was in the National executive committee to the president all the documents, and I expected it to go into the inquiry and to the police and finally end up in a satisfactory answer, at least to implement the gazette notifications according to the law and collect the money. Leave apart what has happened in the past, but nothing has happened. I think about more than 1 billion has lost during the last 3 years of the corruption that is going on in imports of iron.
Dr. Karuratha, you were speaking of the work that you've done. It's quite commendable that you have lodged complaints with the president, so on and so forth. However, you were stressing on the present governor's statement about the arbitrary taxation that is in place. What do you suggest, Dr. Karuratha? What should be the way forward?
No, he was. The suggestion is that not that we have a tax policy. The tax policy is there. All the taxation laws or regulations are there, but implementation is totally negative, and there is the percentage collected is probably less than half.
You said that 5% of the individuals can afford a 3 million rupee car, and you said it only affects the 5% of the section of the population as well, Dr. Karuratha. What should be the way out if that's the case? If you are not going to take from the rich and give it to the poor, Mr. Varun Surya said the Robin Hood economy does not work, and you agree somewhat that it works because you have to take from the rich and give it to the poor. What should be the way out?
What I suggest is that already they have agreed on a tax policy and the regulations are there. But if you but when you when you look at the direct taxation, that is collected anyway. As soon as some exchange is taken.
Who has introduced a new tax policy?
But the other other taxes are collected by a machinery, and if the machinery is not operating properly, then it becomes a situation.
So basically, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that there needs to be the accountability and the accountability to ensure that this money that they say they are going to collect is being collected, and the money that they say they are going to spend is being spent.
Dr. Karuratha?
I don't think. Are you trying to say that tax is really collected?
No, I'm saying so that basically it comes back to the point that there is a lack of accountability. If there is accountability, then the tax that needs to be collected will be collected.
Yes.
And the money that should be spent where they say it's going to be spent will be spent where it's going to be spent.
Post-budget monitoring.
Exactly.
Post-budget monitoring.
Post-monitoring.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We move on to the final round after this short commercial break. We're talking about budget 2016. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the final round with Dr. Vikram Karuratha, leader of the Nava Sama Samaja Party. Dr. Karuratha, your position on the budget seems to be not very clear. You said it is a politically motivated budget at the start, and then you said a new taxation policy has been reduced, but more can be done. And then you said you should take money from the rich and give it to the poor. What is your position on the budget 2016, yes. Dr. Karuratha?
Now, it is easy. We don't need Robin Hoods to rob the rich. We need Robin Hoods. Now, I was talking about the accountability, and he said now people's committees also could go into check the taxation and so on. So, if we have certain Robin Hoods who could go into the offices and see whether taxation is done properly. We are not asking for illegal action, but legal action. Robin Hoods who can see whether the legality is there. How much money is collected according to the law. That is what we need. For that we need certain kind of mass agitation, people's committees and agitators, Robin Hoods, people's tribunals who could go to places and see whether taxes are collected and the custom duties are collected and so on, and see that the due from the rich is properly collected, then I think there will be enormous release for the people.
Dr. Karunaratne, what do you think should be the way forward for Sri Lanka in terms of our economic vision?
I think the accountability system should be monitored properly, and the parliament should exert more pressure on the people who are collecting taxes and so on, and there's a committee, I suppose, which is has the power to check and see whether this is done, because at the end of the year saying that these are the tax proposals, but the collection is only 10%, is not the way to run a country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karunaratne. I now move on to Mr. Krishmal Varanasuriya, attorney at law and political activist. Mr. Varanasuriya, Dr. Karunaratne said that we don't need Robin Hoods, we need proper monitors to go there and ensure that the rich pays the poor. Are you in agreement with Dr. Karunaratne's statement?
Yeah, Shamir, one of the greatest freedoms, or one of the greatest things that we, amongst the many of unresolved promises, one of the greatest things that I think the people of this country won on the 8th of January, re-emphasized on 17th of August, is the freedom to speak freely. I think that is that. Everyone must agree with that. At times when people shunned away, now people have no barriers in speaking freely. Now, what I think we need to do is, we need to work on that freedom that we've achieved. I agree with Dr. Karunaratne that we must have massive input of citizen participation, because now there are no white vans taking you away. We have also got a constitutional right in the freedom of information. It is now a right. It's a constitutional right that we brought into the 19th Amendment. As of right, a citizen is entitled to information. I say we must have several citizens committees to go into ministries, ask how monies have been spent. If they don't give you that information, take them to court, because they have violated your fundamental right. You have fundamental right to information now in the Constitution. Together with that, all these misnomers that we were discussing, the diamond stories or the electro car story, I think can be avoided. You know, ministers after all are politicians. Parliament is made of politicians. There are masses of educated youth out there in all these fields. Get think tanks. Get think tanks into all these ministries. Recruit them to look at policy framework. Look at what the repercussions are, the pros and cons. You know, that's how a country goes forward. Because no one expects every minister to be repository of all knowledge. You know, they are politicians. They may have one particular knowledge of one subject area. But we can have think tanks in these ministries to look into these aspects, just like we're discussing now. So together with citizens' movements, and we have to, as citizens, move away from this mentality. I'll once again say, budget is not something handed down to us by a government. We are not there with a begging bowl telling the government, how much are you going to give me this budget? Budget is how we tell the government how we want ourselves governed. So it's time for the citizen to empower ourselves and tell the government, look, I say, we have sent you there for a purpose. This is not the way you should be doing it. This is the way you should be doing it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varanasuriya, for your thoughts. We now move on to Professor Sirmala Abiratne. Professor, the former president making an announcement recently, I was watching on a particular media outlet saying that there was money until the 8th of January, and on the 9th, there was no money. Development has come to a standstill. Infrastructure development is not taking place in the island anymore. When you look at the budget 2016, is it true? The time starts now, Professor.
When you look at the public investment part section of the budget, compared to last year, previous budget, this year, previous budget, and I think there is an increased allocation of public investment there. But we should understand that all this public investment in the past was based on borrowings, entirely borrowings, because our revenue, tax revenue, is not sufficient to cover even the recurrent expenditure. You know that in the budget expenditure side we have two items, one is recurrent, another one is capital, and the recurrent is the maintenance of the existing expenses, Now public sector salaries we paid last year, and this year also we have to pay it, and next year we have to pay it too. So like that, all expenditure, maintenance should be there in the recurrent. So our government revenue, the tax revenue is not sufficient to cover even that part, which means actually we are borrowing even to sustain our day-to-day meals. So we are in that kind of situation, so that the anything that is coming under the capital account, that is the public investment part, it should come from borrowings. So what we have seen in the past, we have seen lot of infrastructure development, and the return, the rate of return, and the time that is taken, the time duration, and these things is still questions. But the infrastructure development based on borrowing, so that the borrowing has maybe reduced, that's why you don't see it, but it has to be increased even with borrowings, but of course its return has to be
Is it justifiable to ask the people to tighten their belts 5 years following a conflict?
I think in an organized country, everybody should pay taxes. Everybody should pay taxes, because we have to depend on the government service supply. There are certain services that the government has to supply, but then there is a danger that government got this money, government is spending someone else's money, not the government's own money. So if the government is going to tell that, okay, sorry guys, and I am not going to
Thank you very much,
collect your garbage or to buy medicine for your hospital, and I'm going to give it to someone else, and then that's bad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aberatna. I now move on to Mr. Rusiripal Tennakon. How concerned are you about the future of Sri Lanka, Mr. Tennakon? Your time starts now.
Yes. I wish the finance minister in his budget speech addressed certain key issues that is prevailing in the country today. We can't forget that 20% of our population is having an income, living with an income of less than $2 per day. In rupee terms, it's about 300 rupees a day. So this is very much far below the poverty line. In other words, there is unequal income distribution in the country in a very serious way, involving a large significant percentage of the population. That is one thing. And on the other hand, there is a fast growing aged population in this country. The aged population in 2020 will be in the region of about 15 to 20% of the total population. So these things have to be addressed in a very serious way in any budget proposal that can be called that it has addressed the issues. But in this instance, I think he has given priority to this question of instead of even consolidation. A consolidation would have meant, as you said rightly, tightening on the belts. A fiscal consolidation at this stage in a situation like this certainly will yield to tightening of belts. People are not ready because they have been suffering so much, they are in so much of poverty, so much of difficulty, they really want some consolation. So that part has been addressed. But with all these difficulties, we must appreciate that a significant contribution has been made to education, a significant percentage of contribution has been made to health. These are, in long-term perspective, these are good things in this budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennakon. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on this show. Dr. Karunaratne, Mr. Varun Surya, Professor Aberatna, as well as Mr. Tennakon. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Thank you very much, Faraz. And thank you very much, Shahin, for joining us this evening. A few points that I would be taking home today. The budget is politically motivated, according to Dr. Karunaratne. A Robin Hood economy does not work, according to Mr. Varun Surya. Reforms are needed now, according to Professor Aberatna. And also, where are the factories? Where are the investments that was promised, according to Mr. Tennakon? Where is the economy really heading? A question to ponder. Take care and good night.